Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comment. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator, for you talking about no surrendering and how to be stabilize the Middle East is very important for us here, and we have to fight the terrorists there. And I want to ask you, so what, as the president, when you be there, what are you going to do about the issue of Darfur in Sudan? And Sudan is also maybe considered a terrorist country, and Ibn Laden one day maybe he's there also.
Thank you, sir. What's going on in Darfur was declared by then Secretary of State Colin Powell as genocide a long time ago. We as Americans and committed to the noblest words ever written, that all people are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, then those people in Darfur should have access to those rights and not be subjected to genocide. What's the problem? The problem, I think you know, is that in the UN Security Council, China and or Russia blocks most of the efforts we make to address it. Another problem is the sheer geography of the region. It's huge, and it's also very difficult to separate sometimes the combatants as to who's on what side and where. But we were able to go into Bosnia and stop genocide there. We were able to go into Kosovo and stop genocide there. We ought to be able to do what's necessary to stop it in Darfur. I suggest a league of democracies where we don't have to depend on the goodwill of Russia and or China in the Security Council. We join together and take significant actions. Imposition of a no-fly zone would be a good beginning. Obviously, our preference would be African nations having military on the ground, and for us to provide the necessary support and financing and whatever is necessary to see if that doesn't succeed. But I'm prepared to do whatever I can, and whatever the American people will agree to. You have to have the American people on your side and convince them of this genocide. The reason why more Americans aren't aware of it, very frankly, is because no television cameras are allowed in the region, as you know. So we don't see this horrible situation where hundreds of thousands have been killed and millions displaced. So I will bend my efforts in those ways and other ways to try to stop it. And thank you for your advocacy, and I'm sure you have some very personal involvement in the issue. Is that correct? Would you tell us?
So we are here as a group of Sudanese refugees coming from Sudan because the war in the south and Darfur, and then we have that issue in our country. Until now, it's taken long, and many people used to talk and nothing happened. And even Sudan government used to promise just to working with United Nations, but they used to breach their commitment and they're doing nothing every time like that. So this is why we try to organize ourselves and asking you people there so you can help us.
Thank you. Next.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The Veterans Administration is overstretched dealing with just the men from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and now with these new guys from Iraq and Afghanistan coming in, it's going to take basically a broken system and totally decimate it. What, as president, will you try to do to make sure that doesn't happen, so we won't let these guys down?
Thank you, sir. Among a number of mistakes that we were made is that we went on the assumption that this was going to be a short war for a long period of time. Obviously, that was not the case. There's an enormous strain on our veterans and our military medical facilities. I carry around with me in my pocket this quote from George Washington in 1789, who said it far better than I can. The willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional as to how they perceive the veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated by their country. I think that is more true today than it was in 1789 when General Washington said it. First, I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of Colonel Baudet, who, by the way, not everybody's perfect. He's a lawyer. And he went to court on behalf of World War II and Korean War veterans because he believed they earned the health care that they are now receiving thanks to Colonel Baudet's efforts in court. as you know, as a result of the scandal at Walter Reed and other scandals, they appointed a commission headed by a man that all of us love dearly, and that's Senator Bob Dole, who, as you know, was grievously wounded in World War II. And Donna Shalala, the former Secretary of Health and Human Services under President Clinton, they made a series of recommendations. They are good recommendations. They should be implemented immediately. We also need to rely more on our veteran service organizations, the VFW, the American Legion, the MVets, the Disabled American Veterans. They're the ones that deal with these issues every single day, and we're not paying as much attention to them as we should. So we're going to have to spend a lot more money, and we are going to have to understand that out of this conflict, there's probably going to be cases, and maybe an increase in cases of PTSD. As you know, the conditions under which they are fighting are extremely, extremely stressful. Maybe Bud could add just a comment to it. Bud?
Yes, thank you. We have several initiatives underway with the Veterans Administration to establish clinics throughout the country. Obviously, all of those things take money and time. We are just getting one in my hometown down Fort Walton Beach that I have worked on for 14 years. I was a previous veteran, Commissioner of Veterans Affairs in Florida, and obviously coming out of this war are some really badly injured people with traumatic brain injuries, PTSD, many amputees. Like any war, we have a lot of very, very terrible casualties. I think our administration is doing the best they can to try to muster up the money to make some progress in that area, but as you know, we're living with a very divided House. We have, as you know, a Republican president and a Democratic Congress, and so things are not going well in that respect. My suggestion, you have two congressmen, and you have two senators, and you have your congressmen. Ask for their support. If they don't listen, demand their support. And if they don't listen to that, march.
Could I mention my favorite lawyer joke? You know the difference between a lawyer and a catfish? One is a scum-sucking bottom dweller, and the other is a fish. Please go ahead.
Senator, in light of what you just said about veterans and veterans health care, do you support full and assured funding for veteran health care in the VA system? And if so, would you introduce a bill that calls for that?
To do what?
To have full and assured funding for veterans health care.
Yes, sir. I will do whatever is necessary to that they receive full and assured funding, and that's important. I have supported legislation to fully fund veterans' needs for my entire political career, sir, and I will continue to do so. Yes, sir. I think someone else has got a...
My name is Troy Rehaw. I'm a pro se litigant. We have filed suit to stop the use of the discredited machines to be used in these elections. We'd like to see every vote count, and we'd like to make sure what happened at the straw poll doesn't happen again. Would you please address the use of discredited machines and computers in the elections?
To be honest with you, I do not know a lot about the issue, and as you know, I did not take part in the straw poll, so but I'd be glad to examine any information or anything that you want to share with me. I'd be glad to. As you know, it is largely, not totally, but somewhat to some degree a state issue on some of these issues, but I'd be glad to engage in it and have a look at it. Everybody should be entitled to a fair vote, obviously.
You don't have an opinion, though, just on the use of the discredited machines?
I don't know anything about the discredited machine.